Good evening and welcome to the East Lyme Board of Selectmen special meeting for the purpose of the budget review of the Board of Ed budget at the East Lyme Town Hall on March 13th, right now at 6:30 p.m. If you can, would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is the Board of Ed budget presentation to the Board of Selectmen. Who's going to get up and speak first? Jamie, if you'd like to say so, give us your name, address, and title.
My name, address, and title. Jamie Bar-Shelburne, 31 McElhaney Drive. I am the secretary for the Board of Education. I'm filling in for Eric tonight. Do you have? Oh, there we go. Okay.
We have a couple slides that we're going to
Have a
share
couple
with you.
slides.
Now, Ron, you have some hard copies in front of you as well.
So I'm going to go over the timeline with you tonight before Jeff gets up here. As you know, since Jeff has started with the Board of Education, we've been doing our budget a little differently. We start in November with budget workshops, which we invite the Board of Finance to and the Board of Selectmen. And it's where we have powwow discussions on how we would like the budget to go, how Jeff would like to see the budget, how staff would like to see the budget go. And this year we started in November with a meeting. There were a couple Board of Finance members there. We had a lot of discussion. And then we carried it over to the December meeting with a couple more Board of Finance members were there with us those nights. Jeff came in with a 10.30 budget for us to review. And we talked about how that might be too high, considering what's going on in the world, but that we still wanted to have a robust education here in East Lyme. So that took us to January 9th, where Jeff gave us his budget with a presentation, and it came in at 6.97. That followed up a bunch of meetings in January, February, and that brought us to our February 27th meeting, where we had heard from, I would say, roughly 200 members of the public who came to our meetings, our public hearings, our public meetings, and they told us they would like us to put more money back in the budget. So the Board of Education listened to the public, and we added money back to our budget. And on February 27th, we approved our budget at an 8.88%. So we are presenting that to you tonight.
Thanks, Jamie. Jeff Newton, Superintendent. So with what Jamie said, we are here to share the Board of Ed's adopted budget of 8.88. So we'll have a couple slides for you, and then we'll open up to questions. You all received the budget book, so you've had a chance to review that, hopefully, and that is all the detail, right down to the object code detail as well. So we can talk about that and answer any questions that you might have. Let me first start with just that snapshot of what Jamie just mentioned. We started off at the 10.30%, made some reductions, brought it down to 6.97, and then through many of those deliberations, hearing from the public, we pushed it back up to 8.88%, and that's what the Board of Ed adopted, which is now down to you, and we'll go on to the Board of Finance for ultimate and final decision-making and discussion and deliberations as we work through that through the rest of this month and into April. Drivers. I've shared this slide a lot, and I've talked a lot about this slide with all constituents and stakeholders. There's three main drivers that are really the advocates for this, the drivers, I guess I'll say, for this budget. Number one being salaries, number two being health insurance, and number three being a lot with inflation. First, with salaries, contractual obligations, you can see on that first section on the left there, 43.92% of the overall increase is reflected as salaries, and it's due to, again, to contractual obligations. Contractual averages about 2.5% of an increase. Benefits was another big one. We are currently sitting at a 12% increase still in this budget for health insurance. And we've gotten some new information from the state, which is good news. It's projecting it lower. sitting around 7% now. The Board of Ed decided not to make any changes to the 12%, to leave it and be overly cautious at this point. So I think that's something that we'll have to factor in as we move forward into the weeks ahead and further discussions and gather more information from the state on the partnership plan with health insurance. So we are at 12% in there. Additionally, part of health insurance, a number of families came on to the family plan side of insurance versus being on single or two-person. Children being born, I think it was about 17 people, 17 families, Mariana, that changed over to the family plan. Each family plan is $30,000 in cost. So that increase, 39.48%, or almost 1.9 million of the overall increase in addition to salaries. And then the last component was the operating expenses, and I'll just really highlight inflation. There's nothing new that I'm going to say about inflation that we don't already know. We've all felt it, we're all seeing it. We've been impacted by it this year, and we're anticipating obviously impacts for next year with contracts that we're signing, energy, oil costs, fuel costs, all of the above. So those are all additional costs that we factored in and are looking at roughly almost $400,000 in inflationary costs for next year. So putting those all together, they make up 98.5% of the overall budget increase, or 4.7 million, roughly out of the proposed 4.8 million. So those are our major budget drivers. When we think about educational focus areas, the Board of Ed, myself, all of us across the district are focused on maintaining low class sizes and making sure they're appropriate for meeting the needs of our students. That was a lot of discussion that we had over the last month or so through the deliberations with the Board of Education engaged in. A lot of talk about maintaining appropriate class sizes. We want to continue furthering our engagements with the community, pathways programming. We've got a lot of connections that we've built for this year. It's job opportunities, sending kids out to the community. Right now we're working with Furman's Garage as an example, where we're sending students to a mechanic over there on Friday afternoons, and they're working, having an automotive class of sorts. So things of that nature we're working to increase for students, more opportunities for children. Also continuing to offer a robust educational experience that focuses on the whole child, academics as well as the social and emotional learning needs of students. That requires counseling support, psychology support, etc., and meeting their needs. Post-COVID, we've seen a lot of continued social and emotional components and needs for supporting students at a greater rate than I think we ever anticipated. I'll share a little data in just a second on that. And also providing ongoing intervention and tiered supports for students, and I'll talk about some of the needs there in just a second. So if you just look at academically, I wanted to share some information as it pertains to state testing and scores. You can see we have had a dip. If we look back to our ELA, our math, and our science scores, really focus on our ELA and math scores, back to 2017-18, you can see up to this point, 2021, or last year's data, 21-22, a dip in scores. ELA, we went from 76.8% where students are at down to 72.5, and math dipped down to 68.7. This is grades 3 through 80, our SBAC scores. So that is concerning. Obviously, post-COVID, I think that had a lot to do with it. And you'll notice there's no scores for 19-20, as there was no testing that took place that year due to COVID from the state. So there was some concerns, obviously, with where our scores have gone. They have decreased. On the next slide, the social and emotional side of things, that's the academic side with decreases. And the next slide is around social and emotional and meeting data that supports our focus on implementing and intervening with crisis situations. So the middle school crisis data as of March 1st, 67 student crisis incidents, and at the high school, 90 as of March 1st. Those require a lot of support, counselors, psychologists, oftentimes 211 calls for emergency, for an ambulance to come to the school, administrative support, all of that across the board. Those are higher numbers than the highest numbers we've ever seen. And last year, for students that transitioned over to special education services and having an individualized education plan, you can see there's 124 referrals to special ed and 83 students qualified for services last year. We have gone over the last 5 years from 300s of students identified under special education to 500 students. And that's reflected in our prevalence rate. So if you look at the next slide, our special education prevalence rate, as has every other district, has gone up. Back in 2017-18, we were at 13.1% of our total population was receiving special education services. And you can see that incrementally has gone up, the red graph, and we've surpassed the state average. And last year was at 17.4%, and this current year, and we're sitting around 19%, correct, for prevalence, right? Which is about the 500 students,
Yeah,
roughly.
yeah, 500, but we have, I have another.
Okay, yeah, I think it's right around 18 to 19% for prevalence rate currently. So the special education needs for students has increased. That requires the need for staff, the need for supports to make sure we're assisting and putting the appropriate supports in place for students across our school district, as every other district is doing much of the same. So that's the prevalence rates. On the other side of special education is the fact that we have only 10 students that are outplaced out of district. It's always the goal of any school district to keep kids in what's called the LRE, the least restrictive environment. So we try and keep our kids in-house. It saves money, but it's also the best place for them until there's a need and a time to have them outplaced because we can no longer service some significant needs. But right now, we have, you can see some comparative data of other districts where the average cost, tuition for one outplaced student is $96,000, and the cost for transportation is approximately $28,000. So you can do the math times 10, you can do the math times 20, and you can see, what the that cost would be. So to keep students in the least restrictive environment, keep them in district, again, to a point of making sure we can meet their needs, and sometimes we can't meet their needs, and we need to outplace students. But right now we're doing a very good job of meeting the needs of students, but that requires supports and that requires staff. And on that next slide, I just outlined those tuition costs. You can see I just mentioned the $96,000 average and the $28,000 for transportation, and I also highlighted the benefits of keeping students in districts as much as we can. Per pupil expenditures, I always like to share this information. I've done it every year, and I think it's an important slide, and it's the next two slides. Across southeastern Connecticut, and then across our DIRG, the district reference group. Across southeastern Connecticut, we're falling pretty much in the middle of what we spend on per pupil expenditures for each student. And if you put us up against these districts score-wise, we're at the top of the chart. So we're getting a real good bang for our buck with what we're spending per student and the academic outcome for children as they go through the East Lyme public school system. So that's across southeastern Connecticut, and then the next slide is just across the DIRGs. You can see our district reference group, which is about 24 districts in total. So about $20,224. And then last, I just wanted to share an important component as it pertains to projected future enrollment. Since April 1st will be the start of my 9th year here in East Lyme. And our student population, has really ranged from 28 to 2,600 students. It hasn't gone any lower than that. It hasn't gone any higher. Projected out over the next 10 years, we're supposed to be sitting basically in around that same number. As you can see from that chart, it really doesn't change. But I'll just reference again, with a steady population of sitting around 25 and right now we're above that. I think it says 2542 if I'm 62 if I'm reading correctly. We're over 26, just over 2,600 right now, so we're higher than what is projected. This was back in the fall we received this projection. So steady enrollment over the coming years projected, but again our special education numbers have climbed significantly with that prevalence rate up over 18% now. hence the need to ensure that we're keeping staff in place and doing all we can to meet the needs of every child across our district. So that's all for slides. Again, I wanted to be brief, and we'll prepare some more information with the Board of Finance as the next step, but open it up. And any questions on any of the slides that I had shared?
I'm sure there's some questions. Who'd like to start?
I'm just going to grab mine. Well, you don't have to leave that in for right now.
Okay.
Forget mine.
I'll start.
Okay,
But I'll leave that up just in case you want to reference any slides.
okay.
First, so they're-
And Chicello?
Okay. So I guess first, just for the public, I just wanted to explain that, because I've talked to people and they're a little confused. They keep saying, you know, they're cutting the budget. And this year, your budget was 54.1 million. There's a proposed budget increase of 4.8 million, which would bring it up to 58.9 million. So that's basically what we're dealing with, is this 4.8 million. So you automatically get the 54.1 million. I'm just explaining this for the public because I've been talking to people and they just don't understand that. So that's what I just wanted to start with. And then also, I've been going to all the Board of Ed meetings this past month, the public hearings in February. So I can see that, you know, the budget was really thoroughly reviewed. And I want to thank, you know, the Board of Ed and the members for their due diligence. But I do have some questions. So first, regarding cutting the 18.5 positions, in an article dated February 7th, 2023 in the Connecticut Examiner, you said that if you kept all the elementary school teachers, the sizes would drop below the 15. So my question is, and just from the meeting you went to, if you cut 2 of the elementary school teachers, you would still be within those guidelines? So is that something that could be done?
Potentially. Things will shift and change as we move forward with kindergarten enrollment and so forth. We went off of a snapshot of basically where we were with projecting it for next year. So it could potentially work. There will be fluctuations in and out, as there are every year, with whether we're just outside of the guidelines, below or above.
Okay. It says there's an administrative increase of 5%, and I wanted to know, is that by contract?
No, all that is, it's the increase, the addition of the athletic director position. That is becoming a administrative 092 position. The money, it's being funded by the current individual. He's a teacher and gets a stipend. Then we have 2 assistant ADs who receive stipends. We have a middle school person who receives a stipend. All of that money together is coming together to support the cost of the AD. So there's no additional cost.
Okay.
We're just making the position, as most every other district around us, as a full-time administrative athletic director.
Okay. Let's see. Now, for the special needs children, it was stated at the February 13th, 2023 meeting that you have 4 students leaving. And so my question is, can we reduce the number of paras or reduce their hours if you have students leaving, special needs students?
Well, 4 can leave and 4 can come back in. So at this point, we had, in our original projections, recommended the reduction of potential of a few paraprofessional positions. And we could have 4, 5, 6 more come in, sort of thing. But at this point, there are 4 leaving, so potentially there could be a reduction if that trend holds, moving forward. I don't know if all 4 of those have one-to-ones or not.
I recall talking about 3. I'm not sure where the number 4 came from, but we do have 3 that we know of, for whatever reason, leaving the district. So.
Okay. My other question is education costs sharing. How much would East Lyme get compared to other years?
There's a reduction in it. Well, we'll see what ends up happening at the state. You're talking educational costs or excess costs? Which one are you referring to?
The education costs that
Educational
you get
cost
from the
share,
state, yeah.
So $6 million that comes from the state. It's down 302,000. So down to 5.8 million, if that holds. I think some things are going to, a lot of discussion.
Yeah, there's already been a House bill introduced by the Speaker of the House to restore that funding. So I think there's a fairly good, you don't want to say sure, but comfort level that that amount will come back in.
So that's good. And then my other question is regarding the school project, the maintenance projects. There was, by Governor Lamont, Public Act 22-118 passed a funding bill on July 1st, 2022, and it was a HVAC indoor quality grant. And I wanted to know if we guys had applied for that.
No, I don't think we qualify. Chris, did we?
Didn't seem that we qualified.
Chris, you have to come up.
I just saw it was
Thank
like
you.
$75 million, so
So
I,
there are a couple of things with that grant, if I remember right, it's being broken up into a couple of years. And the primary focus initially are for those schools that are wholly deficient. So we are very fortunate that we have, right now, all of our buildings are, excluding central office, are fully air conditioned. The elementaries were just redone. So we looked at getting some initial monies from that grant, and we were told that we are probably at the bottom of the list right now, priority-wise, because they have so many schools that have no central air. So-
oh, okay, because I just saw it on the capital
Yeah.
plan that you wanted to clean the ducts and stuff, so that's
Well,
not something that would be,
So that's a separate issue. So on the capital plan, there's 3 projects related to what was included in the budget bill last year. The Connecticut budget bill, which put together some requirements for the schools to have all of our HVAC equipment inspected, recertified, and reports done by December 31st of this year. They need to be cleaned as well. So there's money there. There's $50,000, I think is the number I have set aside for the inspections, because we're still waiting for a lot more guidance. And actually, I'm supposed to have a meeting this week or next week with the Connecticut School Buildings and Grounds Associations, putting together some information they've received from their executive staff. But if everything holds true, we have to have the inspections done, and they have to be done by folks who are certified in doing testing and balancing of the systems. So that's typically folks in the sheet metal and the installation areas, not just the engineering side of things. So that'll have to be done by an outside vendor. But as I said, we're still waiting for guidance from the state. It was one of those mandates that came out, and although they've stood up a commission to generate the requirements, nothing's come forth yet. So one of the things we will ask for, obviously, is maybe even a waiver from having our elementary schools done, because they're just basically
you just had them,
finished.
yeah.
So there's a lot in the air with that, but we do know that our ducts need to be cleaned. We did pursue that earlier during COVID, so there's money in the capital budget to clean the ductwork at the high school and also at the middle school, just because it's time, and we're pretty sure that will be a requirement as well, based on these guidelines that are coming forward. It's pretty evident in that, and as well as the other grants that are out there as well as the inspections. So I know I went round and round a little
Yeah,
bit,
no,
but I hope I
I'm
answered
following
your
you, yeah,
question.
no, you did, thank you. Let's see if I have anything else. So just my last question, just talking about the health insurance, the number that you're gonna be using, are you gonna be keeping it at the 12%? Or, I know the town has reduced theirs down to, I think is it 8.1?
A little over 8, yeah.
Yeah.
7.1 is what they're quoting, but we know with people coming on, families and that,
Yeah,
a little bit higher.
Yeah, I would probably end up recommending to the board, and the board will ultimately decide, it's their adopted budget, to reduce it. But we're going to wait a little bit longer, and I think we can work through that.
Yeah. Kevin,
Okay.
do we have an idea roughly when we get a firm number? I mean, the
April or May.
I know,
I think it was the first week of April.
April.
And we, just to let everyone know, we also on the town side budget for 7.1%. That 1% increase is the additional employees we were looking to hire.
Okay,
So,
right,
just so we all know.
thank you.
I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Okay. Bill or Aaron?
So the health insurance, staying on that, the 24% increase is the difference between the 12% increase plus the families that have been added? and that's why it went up. The
Yeah.
increased family policies are almost as much as the actual cost of the increase.
Correct. That's right, yeah, and the difference, thank you for making up the difference from last year, the deficit that we had going into this year.
Oh, so part of this is gonna pay that, fill that hole in? Okay. I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but when you went from the 10.3% to the 7%, 6.97%, you made intelligent professional decisions that said, you know what, me as a trained professional, I think this is where we can go and still give quality education to our students.
Well, it was early. When we get, we always come out of the gate earlier than other districts. At the time, we felt the percentage was still pretty high. So we said, let's bring it forward to the Board of Ed, and obviously we'll have some dialogue and discussion about it. Hence, we put in some reductions. Everything's impactful. And the Board of Ed looked at that, heard from the community, and put those positions back in place.
Yeah, so I started listening to your YouTube video, and it sounded like you felt like, yeah, these are impactful, but these are things we can live with. These are, to me, it's the difference between a need and a want, right? I mean, what I heard was that at the public hearing, everybody said they would like to add things back in. But it seemed like what you did is you focused on what needed to be done to still give the quality education to the students.
Yeah, and at the time, again, we went with a lower budget that had a significant impact, and the Board of Ed ultimately decided to increase and put those positions back in place to continue to meet the needs of students. Again, everything, any cut is impactful to kids. Nobody wants to see any cuts happen, on our end, that's for sure. So.
And the cuts, I mean, the difference between decreasing the growth and the cut, I mean, it's just, the word play there, it's just, it's unfortunate. Oh, I'm sorry. What I didn't start off saying, what I wanted to start off saying was, in full disclosure, my son graduates from Ohio State in 2 months, and East Lyme is potentially one of the school systems that he's going to be talking to. And because this board only reviews and advises, we don't approve or disapprove, I don't feel there's a conflict of interest, and I think I can make an objective, if I could pronounce it, recommendations, so I don't see any challenges there. All right. In your charts where you were showing how we were doing versus the rest of the slide, your slides aren't numbered. The slide, yep, back one, there you go. You don't have science for 2017. Is there a reason why you don't have science?
We did include science on the chart. What got omitted? I noticed that just the other day, too.
Okay.
Circle back with.
It just seems like we do better in science. We're doing better in
Well,
science.
that's, an anomaly.
And I don't
Because
know
we
if-
increased a little bit, which was interesting.
And I don't know if it's because the nature of science maybe is more of a, where math is more of a by rote learning sometimes, and science is more of a, you feel it kind of
Yeah.
thing, maybe. I was just curious about that one. All right. Crisis data in 20 and 19. So your crisis data chart, I'm just taking notes as I went through this here. There's a crisis data chart. I don't know which chart has the crisis data on it. That would be this one here. So your special ed chart that looks kind of like that one there?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So I guess my question, I don't understand my own question. All right, I don't know. I had a question, but I don't understand what it was. Doesn't affect. All right, you're, when you were showing the cost per student for the DIRG, you did the same thing last year. You showed that Salem's cost was lower than our cost by $1,000, significant, but it's a little bit. But you've also said in the past that the Salem students come to East Lyme fully equivalent to all the East Lyme students. And I asked last year if there was any kind of lessons learned that you could look at what it is that Salem does, that they're a little more cost effective. Or is that just because high school's a little more expensive than middle school?
You're talking apples and oranges there with Salem, and they're just looking at a smaller percentage of students. You have 470 students roughly, or around 400 students versus,
So it's more economical to do a smaller population?
I don't know, Bill.
Okay,
I don't know.
okay. It just,
Yeah, I mean, apples and oranges is not a district of comparative size, stature, et cetera. So I don't know why they would be $1,000 less.
okay. There's talk about there's a process in place, or going to be hiring a purchasing manager in town. Is the expectation that they're going to be working on Board of Ed projects as well as town projects? Are you familiar with
We
it?
have no plans to do so. We haven't heard anything about that.
Okay. So maybe we can have that conversation afterwards. In your presentation online, I saw that there was a block about district marketing. What is district marketing?
We're just talking about different ways that we continue to market the East Lyme Public Schools as a district that we want. Somebody's out in California researching on the website, for instance, looking for districts across, or moving to Connecticut. How can we do a better job of marketing ourselves to be one of the best districts in the area that we'd like them to come to our schools?
So to try to attract new students to town.
Yeah, one option. Yeah, exactly. That's one area of it.
Okay. The other questions I had, I think you kind of talked through that the athletic director you said was going to come from 111, decreases in 111,
Yeah,
but
sure.
111 shows an increase, but I think what you're saying is it would have been more of an increase if that money for the athletic director didn't come from that unit.
Yeah.
125 is allowed to just decrease, not your total 25,
Yeah, you see where the decrease of money in 125 is, that's what's funding the AD. Remember, we're taking
okay.
those stipends where, the current individual's salary, et cetera, it's all
Okay,
funded.
I didn't look at 125, I just read the narrative that said it was coming from 111, that's fine. I did have a question. So 126, the growth was 8.3%. The narrative doesn't talk about whether or not that was only a salary raise of 8.3, or if there were additional people added to that unit.
So all the paraprofessional, in that contract settled, the budget for this current year, 22-23, does not include their increase because it's settled after the budget has been approved. So we're basically making up 2 years.
So 8.3 is essentially 2 years.
2 years worth of increases.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Don't really care about that. 437 projects, you don't really describe what those projects are.
Yeah, we have a handful of projects, and Ron, you want to come and talk about a few of them? We have carpet replacements, things of that nature, things that, we want to make sure we work to keep on a schedule of making improvements. Because if we don't, they're just going to back up down the road.
So I have money set aside in each of the schools, and just to go through this briefly, some of those funds are small amounts, like $2,500 to $3,500 for each of the schools for projects that come up during the year. Where the example I use is 2 years ago, the middle school bought new kilns, and in the midst of buying the new kilns, they did not realize that we also had to change out the electrical circuits. So we didn't have money set aside for that. It came out of the facilities budget. So now, to be a little more proactive, recognizing that these, you know, small amounts of money come up, $2,500, $3,500 at each of the schools, we put that in there, so that's in there. I know if you've heard the discussions that came up during the Board of Ed meetings and whatnot, of course, carpet is an ongoing maintenance item, and we have old buildings with old carpet, and so there's money set aside at middle school and the high school for carpeting to replace, in some cases, at minimum 20 years old carpet to upwards of 30, 40. We're not quite sure how old some carpet at the high school is. So that's just basic maintenance. Other items of interest. At central office, we have some asbestos issues still that we're working on abating in the basement, so we can use some of that space. We had some asbestos abated this year, and we have to go back and finish the repairs to the walls and the ceilings. District-wide, I put money in each year for support for the special needs community, both indoor money and outdoor money, some incidental money for our grounds, and trying to think anything else that looks particularly of interest. Yeah, aside from the carpeting, which are larger, more expensive projects, typically these are, you know, 10,000 or less projects that we do in-house with our own staff, or with maybe hiring a local electrician to help us because we don't have a licensed electrician on staff. So I can talk further about anything related to projects that you may have.
No, I think that's, it's just, I got it. Thank you. So my next two questions are related to fuel, both for the vehicles and for heat and oil. The 627 fuel went up 43.7%, and the 620 fuel goes up 52.5%. So my question is, do you work with the town so that your growth is consistent with their growth?
For gas, 627, or for Coke, 617.
Yep.
Diesel.
Yep.
We get that at the town garage, so I get that cost from.
Okay.
And the cost of diesel, which is a bulk of what we use for our buses, went up 46.7% per gallon from what we're paying this year. That's the number that, and I confirmed with Joe, because that's the number that I
Okay.
Both the heating oil this year, I locked in, because the town, we have a larger tank, so the town just has, and Joe can, you know, I don't wanna talk to the town, but he has a smaller tank, so I believe he uses another vendor, and it's difficult to get locked in, so I went with the Learn Consortium. They put together a bid for heating oil, and so I talked with that cost. That cost, that would come down just a little bit, because I had used an estimate, but it did come down a little bit, so, but our budget is, so I just got the price.
Okay, thank you. And my other two questions, my last two, sorry. Your federal and state revenue are all holding zero. It sounds like there's some potential for one of them to come up, but typically year over year, do they stay flat, or is there growth, or it's a shot in the dark?
So I always use the same amount of 22, 23, because we do not, we don't have confirmation on those grants, until probably, some of them, not till June, May or June. And then there's a couple that I won't know until, it runs on the federal fiscal year, and they don't, confirm the amount until October 1st, typically. So you can see, if you look at, if you're looking at the first one, our IDEA grant, you did have an increase. If you look at the 21-22 actual grant to what they gave us for 22-23, it's up slightly, $13,000. It fluctuates, you know, plus or
Not to worry
minus.
about,
It's not
yeah,
anything major.
Okay. And then my last question is that the in-district students, special needs students, I did do the math, it's $124,000 that we saved to bring them in district. What's the cost in district? Is it the same, I mean, is there a specific, for those students that we would, if they went out of district, it would be,
Yeah.
like I said, $125,000. If they're in district, is it the same cost essentially as every other student?
It will vary per student. You could have a student that requires a one-to-one paraprofessional, requires OT services, physical therapy. It varies, pursued based on the IEP and what the needs are.
But compared to the 125, it's half the price, a quarter of the price? I mean,
I can quantify a number, I don't know.
We did an estimate for one of the Board of Ed updates. I can look for it while we're talking, but it's less, you know,
Okay.
in general. But it does depend on the needs.
yeah, okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Ann?
Yeah, I have a number of questions and a few concerns because the numbers are high. 8.88% is a large percent increase, the biggest I've seen in my years since 2017, serving. And I realize inflation is driving so many things, but hopefully there's some room within this budget for some reduction. I'll just begin with the slides and then I'll go to the budget book. So with the slides concerning the crisis data, so this might have been the question, Bill, that you might have been thinking about, but there's data for 22-23, so what kind of percentage increase
It's,
in these, in crises did we see from, previous year, like during the COVID stretch of years to 22-23?
I'd have to go back and look. We probably had a previous slide on the rest of the previous year. It's up, put a percentage on it, 15%, 10-15%.
Okay.
Minimum.
that was my question. It didn't make any sense because I put 2019, 2020, and I'm looking at this. And I'm like,
Okay,
so
yeah,
I tried to go
okay.
pre-COVID to try to see what the
So
growth
that-
was
Yeah.
Yeah, that
pre-COVID.
might be helpful, some helpful
Yeah.
information.
Post-COVID, it's
to
definitely,
have.
definitely.
I mean,
been up.
clearly there's an increase, but it'd be good to know where have we been and where are we going with that? As it results in the need for more staff. Another slide, which is on, towards the end here, I believe, let's see, the very last. Nope.
Check the roll.
No, yes, it's enrollment, so where am I in that? Not so much the future in enrollment. Well, okay, we'll just work with that. So the enrollment statistics are very good to see, and good to see some trends going forward. Let's see, maybe a couple of years back would be helpful too. But I think a question that we had as a board that we've discussed was looking at data that includes enrollment, staffing, and administrators, just to get that holistic view of where that has been and where that's going. And I believe Kevin may have asked you, Jeff, that question. I'm not sure if that's something the board needs to be asked directly, but for me to make a meaningful analysis of the budget, because so much of the budget is, in the budget increase, the 4 million plus, is directed to staffs and salaries, benefits. Having a sense of where enrollment is and where these other categories are would be very helpful.
So enrollment stayed the same, basically, over the number, as I mentioned earlier when I was going through the slides. Hasn't changed the last 5 years at least, and moving forward, it's basically staying the same. It's fluctuated a little bit up and
Okay.
down, but again, we haven't gone at any great dips of any sort. Special ed numbers have rapidly increased, where we've got a high number of students now receiving services. So that's requiring maintaining staff at least,
Okay.
and an increase in staff. You got to throw COVID in there, where we hired a bunch of remote teachers, remote staff members. It's all over the
Right.
map. And so and administrative hasn't changed at all, other than the fact that we added the AD, but we just basically made it a administrative position, and cost neutral. And their jobs have skyrocketed as well, with bullying reports and having to do with bullying issues as an example, and on top of everything else. So I'm not quite. I'm not sure what you're looking for,
Well,
number one, and yeah, you would
Yeah,
need
I
to
mean,
make a request to the
if you,
board
I mean,
for that.
if we're, we've seen a sort of downward trend, a slight
Downward trend of what?
downward trend of some enrollment through some years. I mean, you've had fluctuations, small
Minor,
amounts,
yeah, minor
but
fluctuations.
still, I guess my point is, we seem to be adding staff.
Exactly,
Okay.
because of the special ed
Just
population
because of
going
special
up.
ed and nothing else?
Mainly, that's the biggest reason.
Okay,
yeah.
but without some real, chart and graph, I take your narrative for that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that would be good to see it in a more numerical form. And have some, we've hired X number of special ed
Yeah.
professionals or others because of the need for the students. So this sort of segues into another question I have, which is the 8.5 FTEs that were paid for by ARPA,
Correct.
ESSER funds, and now that has ended, that funding source has ended.
Correct, end of this year.
So those positions are still here on the books, okay? So those are additional staffing positions, correct?
Those are
That-
remaining in the operating budget.
Yes, but they didn't exist, so they didn't exist prior to COVID, or prior to,
Correct, some
whatever.
are elementary teachers, some are technology
Okay.
teachers, paras.
Okay.
And
but that's an example.
school psychologists as well.
Right,
Yeah.
but I guess my point is just seeing the numbers as opposed to having the narrative would be very helpful. And I don't think I'm speaking just for myself, that would be helpful. I think, Bill, you had
Yeah,
had similar thoughts?
Yeah, I gave Kevin my idea for a chart that would just show the population of students, population of staff, population of administrators, just to say, over time, what's it look like? Is it just like, yeah, there's the round and error kind of head count differences, or is it because we're doing the advertising to try to get more people into school? Are we attracting in more and more special needs people, so now we have to hire more and more staff to address those special needs? Or is it just, everything is 3 lines are run kind of parallel?
Okay. Yeah, again, no change in administrators. Enrollments basically stayed the same. I guess I'm not understanding the reason or the rationale why. But if you can make the request to the Board of Ed, and if the Board of Ed, see, I won't produce anything that the Board of Ed hasn't seen first, sort of thing, so.
No, when I saw that this year that the administrative didn't go up as high as the certified, I was like, I'm happy, because in the past, I've seen administrative grow higher than certified, and I'm like, I don't get it.
On our end, because it hasn't moved, the needle hasn't moved for us, other than during COVID, we increased, we're actually decreasing by 0.5 next year.
Yeah,
We decreased by 0.5, and the AD component, so.
Yeah. So as I say, I saw that this year, and I'm like, that's good. That's, kind of what we're trying to do, is the people that touch the students are the ones that are getting addressed.
Okay.
All right, on to a different topic. So I guess if the board is interested, the board can make a request to Board of Education for that data. So my next question is about the minimum budget requirement. Do we have a 23, 24 number that we are officially working with that will be provided to the state? I'm sorry, you filed it in August.
Form that I need to file. It doesn't get filed until every August.
Okay.
For
Okay.
the fiscal.
So you'll have that, but your estimate of what that might be, I know it's last year's budget number, maybe with some slight adjustments. You have to do that. Okay. All right, that's always good to know and for the public to know, because dovetailing your point, and that, any yearly increase to the education budget, has built-in permanent consequences, meaning, we can't go below that minimum budget requirement. So any additions to your budget have great significance. So just a reminder about that, and it would be good to have an estimate of that number. I would appreciate that. Thanks. Okay, I'll just go through a few more. Ann and Bill have covered a number of my questions, but on the revenue side, I understand that, yes, there is talk about the restoration of the ECS grant, which would be really wonderful, back to last year's amount, and sort of putting the new calculation on hold going forward. That'd be great. So does the district have a plan or administration or Board of Ed to lobby the state, our state legislature, to restore that grant? I mean, will you take an active role in that?
I think it's already well underway, yeah. Yep, we're beyond that. We've spoken to legislators.
Great.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I've been in touch with both Martha Marks and Senator Marks, as well as Representative
Okay.
Cheeseman. They're extremely supportive of restoring that.
I think there's a consensus about that, but just wanted to ask.
I'll remind, I have a Zoom call with Senator
Yeah.
Marks as well
I mean,
coming up.
The more
this
you
week,
can
so-
mention it,
Yeah,
the
I'll
better.
mention it.
I
Yeah.
think it's probably helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Back to Salem, Bill's set of questions. Salem and other tuition, a pretty substantial amount. So are there fewer Salem students of high school age attending our high school than in past years? That's one question. Has tuition for Salem and other out-of-district students increased? And what's the total number of 8th graders from Salem who are actually eligible to attend our high school? I'm just trying to get a sense of what's happening with Salem vis-a-vis East Lyme.
It's fluctuating.
So the tuition rate is based on a agreement?
The contract,
Yeah.
which was recently done.
Correct.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah,
So
so
that rate,
yeah.
that rate for them for next year
Mm-hmm.
is, the regular ed, I believe, is pretty much staying the same, and the special ed is increasing slightly.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the current year rate that we have for them was based on the actual numbers for when we were during COVID, where we have the virtual, like, we have the hybrid model, those, the COVID expenses, so all of
see.
those,
Okay.
so the base for this year was a
Is
little
different,
higher.
yes.
So then the next year's rate is based on 21, 22, a more normal year, so
Okay.
that's why the rate. Typically, it goes up a little bit, there's a 5%
It's a five.
increase that's built into the,
Okay, so that's, so yes, so
and I
that,
believe
that's
there
something
are-
that you
there are,
tended to.
There's 5 to 8 less students coming next year, I think they've chosen
Other paths,
So-
okay, okay. Is that something that,
Total number,
okay, right, so is that something that concerns the district, or you're just sort of, you can't, you don't really have a trend yet to figure out if it's mattering, if they're all going to NFA or something like that?
No, Salem is in a partner agreement with us.
Right.
So unless a parent,
they go, I mean, they.
well, there's magnet school, yeah.
Right,
We've seen a
right.
decrease in magnet school
Okay.
students too, so that's.
Yes,
that's a
I
good-
saw that,
as well, yeah.
okay.
But, no, it's fluctuated, but for the most part, I would say the same. Base rate, 15,793 is the premium-based tuition rate for a regular ed student,
Okay.
so.
So my
But
question
yeah,
was
so-
more of almost a marketing question, is there a trend, are you worried about that? Because, you get a substantial amount of money, for that, from Salem.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, again, over the years, it's gone up and down.
Okay,
It hasn't been a concern. I don't know what Salem's future enrollment looks like. That could be a question, we can ask Salem if they've done any enrollment studies
Okay.
to see if they've got any projections.
I'm gonna jump into the rest of the object codes and using the summary that we've gotten. In safety personnel, that's 116. So what is the reason for that 10.5% increase?
There are 2 positions, 2, possibly 3 positions, that are covering in the past. We have tried to cover for ESY, and then for Park and Rec uses our middle school and maybe
Summer,
as well for the
extended school
summer.
year.
So we've
Okay.
extended individuals' days rather than working 1 to 3. They're working longer in order to cover the 2 buildings in the summer
I
that have
see.
people.
Yeah, we found the need. Having kids in the building, we should have security staff on
Right,
site for
right.
the
I
summer
mean,
as
no
well.
problem with that. I just was wondering what's changed, so that's what's changed. Okay, thanks. The computer consultant, 119. Could you explain that increase?
The 14,000.
Yes, it's the 119, it's a 6.3% increase.
Yeah, one individual took on additional duties, so that came about after the budget was approved.
Okay.
In 22-20, this current year, an individual took on more duties and we reduced contracts.
Okay. Back down to retirement severance, 212. So I see that you're using that same figure, it's close to $250,000 for it's a fund to help incentivize and retirements, whatever. So I guess, are you ahead of the game is my question.
So that number right there, with the exception of being within a couple of $1,000, I have a spreadsheet. I build all of that based on.
Okay, Mariana, guess what? I just got a text telling me.
What?
Nobody can hear you.
Oh.
Mr. Birmingham, you're watching, so I got your text.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. So that 225, with the exception of possibly a couple of $1,000, it is actual up to the point where we prepare the budget. If they've told us they're going to retire,
Right.
then I build that in there.
Okay,
If
so-
someone tells
okay.
us after the fact that they're going to retire after the budget's approved, then obviously that wouldn't be in there. But it's within a couple thousand.
Right, I see that you've depleted that. I looked at your,
Yes.
your expenditure.
Correct,
Okay,
and I think, I
so-
believe this
okay.
year, because I
Okay.
think a couple people were after the fact, it might actually be a little over
Okay.
because of that.
And I have a question about substitute certified and substitute services. I understand that the certified might be for the longer term situations. So could you just explain those increases generally, because both lines have increases, so what's going on?
Just saying.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
Budget Code 121.
You get to get your breath,
is
Jeff, for a
for-
little bit.
Is for long-term substitutes. So that number is up because this year we're going to be over in that line, and then when I looked at historical data, we are historically going over. So that is a more reasonable number, and that
Okay.
covers long-term absences for our staff, whether medical,
Right.
maternity leaves, things
Sure.
of that nature.
Okay.
The other is we use Kelly Services for our other subs that are not long-term subs.
Right.
So the substitute services, so that's for substitutes for paraprofessionals and substitutes for teachers. So that is going up just based on, again,
Yeah.
historical data. There was a tough time for a couple of years getting subs and getting coverage. We are now seeing that that's recovering and we're getting more
That's good.
substitutes,
Okay.
which is good because we have people in the classroom, so that is why that's going up.
Okay. And there isn't a contractual increase, but that's more
There
just
has not been, no, there
usage.
actually has not
So
been a
that's
contractual
actually-
increase
Okay,
since
so
we
that's
have
some,
been, I
that's
know.
some good news.
good
That's
news.
probably the rarity
Yeah.
there, okay. Let's see, textbooks, 641, so, could you put, yeah, but- so, yes, okay, so is there any flexibility remaining with that? I mean, I remember going to, I was ex officio to one of your meetings where that topic was introduced, and I wasn't sure if there were waivers or anything else, but are you just going forward with it, or what is the
We
scenario?
asked for, rather than a waiver, we asked for an extension. because
Extension.
We need a program anyways. So there's multiple programs we're actually piloting one, right
Okay.
now. And hopefully we'll get the extension, so we don't have to make any rash decisions, but we haven't heard anything back from the state.
Okay, so there's, I mean, I guess it sounds like you're on course, but there's the potential that you'll deal with that in a different way.
Yeah.
I had a number of questions about capital improvements, but maybe we should move on to the rest of this for
Okay,
others.
let's do
And then
that.
we'll come back to capital improvements.
Dan?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, looking at the major budget drivers chart, and the salaries represent 43% of the budget increases. I'm trying to reconcile that with the notations. Contractual increases average 2.5%, is that correct?
Roughly, yeah.
Of that 43.92, 2.5% were contractual. And then what percent would you attribute to the resolution of the collective bargaining agreement? You had, in addition, a collective bargaining agreement settled after the finalization of the 22-23 budget.
That's the paraprofessional contract that would basically have two, so I'd say maybe, again, if their increase is 8%, I'd have to get you that, I'd have to calculate that out for you, which I can, but
Okay.
their line increased 8%, which basically, if you did an average, it's 4%.
So that'd be roughly 8%, then we got 2.5 for contractual.
Well, no, that's, 8% is their increase from previous year. I'd have to
Okay.
calculate for you out their increase.
I
their
see.
Increase over the 2.1 million. Which I
Okay.
can do that for you after together.
Okay, so that would be a big chunk of that 43.92.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I mean, no, you don't have to do the math right. I'm just trying to get an idea of where those numbers are coming from.
Yeah.
So, and then the minimum wage, do you have any sense of what that represents of that 43?
So part of that, and again, I can get that for you, but part of the reason why there was such larger increases in the paraprofessional contract is because some of the steps were at below minimum wage, and then we have our lunch recess aides, which were at below minimum wage. So again, I can get you that. And then there's the other factor in that is the increase in the $1 million that was initial, 8.5, not 1 million, excuse me, the 8.5 positions from the grant last year that are now in the budget.
So that was paid for, as we mentioned before, with
It was
ARPA.
previously paid for in ARPA, but now
Yeah.
it is in the operating budget. That's also a piece of it, and again, I can calculate that.
Yeah, I was just trying to reconcile that, but that helps me to understand where that 43.92% came from. And of course, I think it was anticipated that some of these ARPA paid-for positions would eventually end up in our budget. I remember someone made that comment during the time, and that was, we were satisfying a need with that, but now the need still exists, and we have to step up, apparently, we really do, to maintain the services that we've come to expect now with the benefit of that money. Looking at the benefits, which is another big driver, as it was pointed out, that the state is now estimating perhaps 7-something%. The increase in your budget was 12%. You want to hold on to that 12. Is that something that might be?
So I think that, and we get the consensus that at the board, yeah, we put in the 12 and we left it at 12 because after this past year where we had gone with the lower estimate from the state and then it came in higher, so we decided we put in the 12, and then when it gets to Board of Finance at this point, they can decide if they want to.
So there's some room there for them to. Would you happen to have a number if you? It's what's that?
373,000.
The difference?
Yes.
There we go. You were right on it.
That number memorized.
Okay, it's 373,000. Okay. Now, well, I'll stay on this. Let's look at the operating expenses now. And what I noticed in looking at all of the different buildings, schools, I mean, electricity has really been a driver on this. And of course, we all know from our own electric bills how it's gone up. But, there was talk, a couple of things that we had considered here. There was one talk of about a microgrid that would have offset some of the electrical costs. And at the time, it didn't seem like it was really made an awful, maybe it wasn't enough to make a.
Well, we missed the window.
We missed the
Yeah,
opportunity.
the window passed us.
But I think if there's some opportunities in the future for similar type of ways, yeah, I mean, I think we have to be,
Break from the board at the.
maybe step to the microphone. so we can hear it.
Yeah,
What's that?
Next meeting, Dr. Lund's going to share, we've got some individuals coming in to present and share some information to the board on doing something similar to that.
Okay. And then the other thing was, we were very successful with the streetlight project. And this year, we really enjoyed significant savings on the cost of electricity when we went to the LED streetlights. And I didn't know if there's any other initiatives or, either by Eversource or elsewhere, to convert those areas in the infrastructure that are still on incandescent or fluorescent
We
lights.
retrofitted all of our buildings over the last couple of years with LED lighting.
So most of it's LED.
Yeah.
I thought maybe that was the case.
Yeah,
Okay,
with
so,
automatic shut-offs and people leave.
so we've taken advantage of those
We
opportunities.
have, yes, yeah, good question.
Okay, on the revenue side, and this was brought up, and I think my question was answered, but on the educational cost sharing, and there is the potential that that'll be restored. But if it's not, we're gonna see approximately the same amount reduction every year into the future, right? That 303?
Seems that way, yeah.
So if we're not able to get that restored, that's something that's going to
That's concerning.
affect us into the future. Do we know how many years?
Yeah, it was a 10-year phase out, but they had they stalled it for 2 years.
Right,
So I
'cause of
think that it
COVID.
was it may have been 1 or 2 years that it took effect, so we might have 8 more years
Okay,
on that
so-
phase out.
yeah, so we're gonna have to deal with that.
Hopefully it'll all be restored, but you're right.
Yeah, let's hope. On the health getting back to the health insurance again, but from a different perspective. Do we know what the cause was of the increase? Was it experience with, people needing more of the, having more health insurance claims, or were more people coming on into the system? Do we have a sense of what?
Specifically for us, or do you mean the?
No, that was an across the board. It had nothing to do with our district
It had
at all.
nothing to do
No,
with
it
our
wasn't,
district.
it wasn't district specific.
So it was a broader, it was.
It was
the
a much,
entire
yeah,
base.
broader
Okay,
state
okay,
issue.
so it's not something we have any control over. I noticed throughout, it seemed that the, supplies and materials had gone down for almost at every school, almost across the board. And I'm wondering, we're trying to save money everywhere we can, but are we in some way shortchanging the students or the teachers by not having, enough, I don't want to be flip about it, but, papers and pencils and, the things you use, rulers.
So there were less in requests from some of the schools, and then in addition, we implemented a new paper cut printing system, which you have to go and swipe your badge in order to print. So our hope is that it's going to cut down on paper, because I'll use myself as an example. When I'm running the budget, I'll print the report, and then I might look and see something that doesn't look right or a typo. I've already printed it. Well, now I can send it to the printer. I can delete all of my previous jobs, and then I just print that one document. So the hope is that will reduce printing paper.
So you've instituted more controls over the use. I go to Staples for my own business, and I almost fall over when
Yeah.
I buy a box of paper.
That's the other issue. The box of paper now is doubled in cost.
Yeah, it's
So we're buying a case.
almost
of
$100
paper.
for a box of paper, and where it used to be, $35.
Well,
So,
the controls are in place now, which should help, especially, it defaults to two-sided as well.
Yes.
So it's not spitting out.
so you're cutting it in half.
Yep, color, it defaults to
So-
non-colored version.
So some of those reductions are the result of more efficient and smart use of those resources. I'm going to stop for now, but I may have other questions as things evolve.
Roseanne?
Thank you. Thank you for starting at the other end of the table.
Save the best for last, Roseanne. Actually, I go
Oh, no,
last, but I don't
you're
count.
last.
Nah, but I don't count.
Superintendent Newton, thank you very much for this printout. I wish you'd given us this first instead of this.
I'm always playing with those, so. Remember that for next year.
Thank you to the board for its hard work in putting this together. I know it takes a lot of work from many different people, and I'll try not to be repetitive, but also to follow up on some of the previous points that my fellow board members have made. If this budget is approved as submitted, is it clear that this means no staffing cuts?
Correct, as of right now. Yes, no position cuts.
Okay. And does it provide for any additional positions within the system?
No, it just maintains exactly what we have, other than the AD switching over to an administrative position.
Okay, so that is on my list. Was the AD teaching any classes?
Yes.
And so what is happening to those classes?
Being absorbed, there's only two classes being absorbed into the rest of the department.
And that will maintain the class sizes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you'd be saving money by having the AD be full-time.
Well, not saving money, it's a wash.
Well, it's a wash, but you also mentioned the assistant ADs.
Those disappear, those stipends
Well,
disappear.
Then so there's no need for those people anymore?
No, because we have a full-time AD.
Those people they're not positioned, they are teachers.
Yeah, they're
I
just,
realize-
their stipend amount. They're not,
Correct.
their teaching duties aren't going away. Just their stipend is being an assistant athletic director for the girls and an assistant athletic director for the boys. Those are the two things that are going away because we now have somebody that's solely dedicated to athletics across the high school and middle school. Keep in mind, not having a full-time AD, that's the other issue, not having a full-time AD under administrative 092, they can have no regulation over the middle school. So that's why we've had to have somebody at the middle school level overseeing. Now, one person can oversee all middle school and high school athletics.
So this will not replace any of the coaches
No.
that are being paid a stipend?
No.
So that is where the cost savings is coming from, except you're still going to have the cost to make up for the two classes that that person is no longer teaching.
No, they're getting absorbed into, for next year, other teachers will pick up those two classes.
Now, so I'm going to jump around a little bit because I'm trying to eliminate some of the things that have already been asked, so it's perhaps not quite as thorough as some of the others. The issue of substitutes, I understand that there's been quite a shortage this year and that teachers have actually been asked to give up their planning periods to come in and cover for substitutes who aren't available. So
No,
I'm wondering.
that was last year, Roseanne. There's been some coverage this year, but that was all last year. We had an agreement where we paid those individuals.
But I understand there's still some shortfalls.
There have been
Now,
some,
is
it's
the
gotten better, but
issue-
there's still shortfalls.
Is the issue that there are not enough available substitutes
Correct.
within the larger system, or is it a matter of pay?
There hasn't been, if you compare to where we used to be, we had enough substitutes in years prior to COVID. Post-COVID, there just haven't been the people there. So districts are finding themselves, I think, starting to pay more, especially for long-term subs. We've had to pay more. You see some of that reflected in the budget. But as it pertains to your everyday regular, sub who's coming in for the day, as of right now, no, there's minimal increases.
So we determine the salary that these substitutes are going to make as opposed to Kelly services?
Yeah.
So a person who substitutes in Waterford might be paid more than doing the same job in East Lyme?
Or
Because
Stonington, or Groton, or, yeah, it varies across the board what each town pays.
Okay, so are we competitive in that field?
Yeah, we are.
So the substitutes available aren't going to other towns because they're paid more?
I don't think so. And again, that's why we went with Kelly Services, because it gives us a larger, robust pool rather than hiring our own substitutes. So we can draw from a greater population of subs.
So I carefully reviewed the figures regarding special ed, and I'm wondering if students who begin in special ed when they enter the school system at the elementary level, Are those students still in special ed by the time they're ready to graduate? Or has the
We hope not.
special ed in the earlier years prevented them from continuing through high school?
No, the goal in any individualized education plan is always to set goals and work to make improvements for the child to exit them out of special education. Now, are there students that will go from elementary to high school and receive services? Yes, there are. And some might receive services when they get into high school or middle school, sort of thing as well.
Do we have any long-term figures on that? Yes.
No.
So really, we don't have a specific measure of how many students have actually been aided by the special ed in earlier years so that they don't have to continue into high school.
It would be all over the map because we have some become eligible in middle school, some become eligible in high school, some exit, some come in. Okay, any other additional thoughts on that?
A lot of disabilities are lifelong, and,
Yeah.
obviously, we hope kids will exit.
Kim, if you're going to talk,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know, we get texted.
Yeah, I don't want another text from John, please.
It's just special education is based on the individual, right? And so while it is an intervention service, and for some students it is not necessarily something they'll experience over the course of their educational career, it's hard to tell who that's going to be fitting for and who it's not until you're sort of in it. We're always talking about when we can reduce things and increasing student independence, but it's not like tiered intervention and MTSS where you expect to see students in for the short term. I mean, special education can be a lifelong need. That's why there's state level services as well
understand.
when kids exit the system.
Going to the Salem tuition that they pay, I understand that they get a reduced rate because we are the preferred school. Is that still correct?
Does Salem get a reduced rate?
Yes. They paid the full.
It's all based off of the contractual agreement as to what they pay for their regular ed students and their special education students, the premium rate and the special education rate as well.
Okay, so that figures out then that they pay the $20,224 per student?
No. That's, are you looking, which slide, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at
The
per pupil,
out-of-district
per
student?
pupil expenditures.
Yeah, that's your overall student, that's not, you didn't say Salem, you say, you're referencing
Right, I'm saying
Salem?
compared to East Lyme, East Lyme the per pupil expenditure for an East Lyme student is $20,000.
Yes, oh, so Salem's paying, yes, Salem is paying less than the,
Because it's just high school.
exactly. Correct.
All right. Now, previously, the state was underpaying or under reimbursing for what we should be entitled, and we weren't the only town in the state. Do we have any indication from the state that they will meet their full commitment?
No, no, right now it's it was 70% this current year, is that?
That's what they projected right now.
So there are legislative bills to fully fund special education, which is what the state should do, but clearly, but they haven't done it. So 70% is the percentage that we have earmarked for excess cost dollars coming back.
And has the board has been in contact with our representatives?
I have, yeah.
We all have,
Yeah.
on a very regular basis.
Yeah.
So one of the goals is to continue to maintain lower class sizes. And could you give us what the minimum class size is currently for elementary, middle school, and high school? If that was in the budget, I didn't see it.
It ranges anywhere from 15 students up to 24 to 25, somewhere in that realm. There could be, some of our high school classes do have more. There's a high school math class, I think, last year they had 30. So it does range based off of what level.
So let me see, I think I have, yes, minimum enrollment. Okay, as I said, I would try to not be repetitive. Let me just take a minute to check here. I wanted to address the issue of recruitment and advertising for more students. That concerns me a bit, as I know that there are already requests for additional space for our existing programs, and I worry about trying to attract and recruit other students to come in when we already have space issues and space needs. Just a personal comment. And so I know that Lyme, Old Lyme, does quite a bit of advertising in the region, including in some of the publications' full-page ads. I don't know how successful that is, but it concerns me because we are already noted as the school system in this area to go to if you have special ed children. We're known in the region as having the Cadillac plan. And I have a number of friends who are in real estate, and that is one of the things that incoming families with students that have special needs say that that's the reason they chose East Lyme.
Okay, yeah, just to be clear though for the public, we don't provide Cadillac plans, just to, because there's a, that using, that word. We always want students to be in the least restrictive environment and provide the best services that we can, but it's never a Cadillac plan of services.
Well, I'm just repeating what has been said to me. So I will yield to anyone else on the table, and if my additional questions don't get answered, then I'll ask to be returned.
Just a couple of things, Jeff. Repairs and maintenance, line number 43 and several of the lines has a significant increase, and there's a big one for 124 and district-wide and so forth. Is that related to the computer incident?
What line item, Kevin?
It was repairs and maintenance, line number is 437.
Yeah, no, it's a project lines we talked about, the carpeting, what Chris Lund came up and talked about.
Okay.
That's not the computer.
Okay, is the cost for the computer incident in this budget at all? Because you and I had talked about that, because we wanted to try and resolve that,
It is not.
Okay, that's good. And this would be a question for Chris, because one of the things we're seeing, is there's a ton of federal money out there, not just for, updating lights, but, solar. We all know, the high school was not the best, the problems there. But has that been considered at some of the other schools? Because there's a lot of rebates and a lot of incentives to go with solar now. And, our schools could be a perfect location for those.
So the question came up earlier about that, and as I yelled from the peanut gallery back there, briefing the Board of Ed on a CHP combined heat and power option for the middle school at the next board. So that's a system that creates the electricity.
Is that the microgrid?
It's microgrid, but in this
Okay.
case, it also takes the waste heat as well and uses that for heating the building. That same company deals a lot with PPAs for other options, and I've had several companies, besides them, reach out for the middle school is one option, nice big roof there. I've said no because we're in the midst of doing roofing at the middle school. But several other companies now are trying to get off of buildings and keep them on the ground, and if you don't have enough ground space, the current solution now is to do above parking lots. So,
Right, we've seen those.
yeah, so there's been some discussion. There's a lot of folks realize those grants are out there, and they're reaching out to us now. So I'm going to continue to pursue that. The same question came up about LEDs. We did the LEDs for the middle school and high school 18 months ago, I think it is now. Mariana had asked if we're saving any money yet, and of course the way that was funded, we won't see any savings until it's paid off, which is a couple of years.
Well, yeah, we did. We went through the same thing. And this is the first year we're noticing a significant savings.
Right. So it's going to be, some of these energy things, or whether or not we go, PPA, which is we buy the power like we're doing at the high school or whatnot. But yes, we are pursuing those, I guess. The short answer is.
Okay. All right, and Jeff, this is just a question because I don't have the question, but it's asked to me frequently. Couldn't we save a lot of money if we reduce the number of buses per run? I know the answer to that question, but I think, that's a good one to ask for you to answer the question.
Yeah, we tried to reduce 2 buses 2 years ago, was it, 3 years ago?
4 years ago.
I've lost all sense of timing with COVID. So prior to COVID, that's right.
Prior to COVID.
We tried to cut 2 buses and it was a complete nightmare. And we were trying to regroup and it took us till November to fix the issues. The problem is the way that the town is structured. You've got so far north, all the way up to Salem, down to here, and people that are up there. The bus routes, trying to cut back, lengthen the bus routes, and kids were not getting to school on time and not getting home until late in the afternoon. So it was a complete nightmare.
Okay,
So I would
thank
never
you.
recommend again.
Yeah, I remember that, but I still get the question every so
Yeah.
often, so I just wanted to
Yeah, I
bring
know
that
it's a
up
good
too.
question, and people see that the buses are, half empty or this or that, but, the buses have, for the most part, filled back up since COVID, which is a
Elementary
good
and
thing.
middle ridership is consistently high. High school is where you see.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So if you see a half-empty bus, it's probably a high school bus.
My son was a senior, and I made him take the bus one day because of something he did. He thought the whole 1,300 kids were standing watching him get off the bus. So. Anyway, and last thing too, here again, it's a really difficult year for all of us as well. Right now, and talk about special education. I was at a conference where State Senator Austin was there, and she pointed out that the feds are supposed to be paying 60% of the SPED cost. They're paying 6%, so there's a 6 in there, but there's a big difference between where they really should be. And, we won't see that changing at all. We've taken a little bit of a hit in the pilot program as well on the town side because, for the payment in lieu of taxes for all the state facilities we have in here. And right now, and for January, the inflation rate was 6.4%. So, looking at your budget is a bit higher. So, that's obviously going to cause some concern and attention. And one of the things too is, we're one town, one budget. When we talked about that incident with the computers, Kevin and I sat down. We put a little constraints down. We figured we can help out with that because we're one town, one budget. We only progress as a town together. But I do get calls. There's never been so many families talking to Pat Ed Payne at Karen Share requesting assistance. And we also see TVCCA providing more and more assistance for heating, water, and sewer because they're doing that this year too. So tremendous amount of requests for assistance by members of the community. So, obviously we have to, it's not a difficult, I looked like I was 40 years old when the budget season started, so.
Yes.
Okay, anyway, we'll move on to capital now.
Yeah, I
You
have one other revenue question
Oh, okay.
From Mariana. Just,
What are you asking, Ann? I'm sorry.
yeah, I had a revenue question before we hop to Chris and the capital improvements. So, just looking at revenue, only 15.85% of your budget, which is under $10 million, is paid for by state and federal or other dollars. So obviously, the remaining, nearly 50 million, whatever, falls on the taxpayer. Just want to point that out. It's not that we can control that, but it is the harsh reality that we deal with. So that's why I had some questions generally about revenue, and it's usually where I begin when I do some budget analysis anyway. Could you, I know in the past year you provided revenue information, probably would be more helpful for Board of Finance when they receive your budget, for any programs that you have, like the integrated preschool, before or after care, creative play school, any rentals. And I know it may not amount to a lot, but just for total clarity and transparency, that we know that these are programs that you run, probably, skin of the teeth, but it's good to know about them and how they're structured, sort of like special revenue accounts. So is that something that you could provide? And you did, thank you for the information. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for the expenditure information about integrated preschool, but I was looking for the revenue side, and I assume some of that is federal or state? No? Where does that come from?
So the revenue from integrated preschool is strictly for the peers. Integrated preschool is
Okay.
required as there is.
Okay, so-
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's for the peer part of the program,
Okay.
and Ms. Davis can understand more, but she uses those dollars to cover, that's why you only see in the integrated preschool salaries.
Right.
The supplies and any other
Okay.
items that are needed to run that preschool comes out of the revenue dollars.
Sure. But it'd be good to see what that revenue is and just to have a sense. I mean, we do it on the town side where a department, I'll just use the most obvious one, building permits. It takes so much to run that department, then we have the revenue account for that particular department for permits and the like. Okay, so that's helpful. So I think, so I guess we could move, thanks Mariana, I guess we could move to the topic of capital improvements, and I think that's tab 5 in the budget book.
You have specific questions?
Yes, well, just generally speaking, then I'll go into some specifics. So in years past, when we received this, Chris, usually you accompanied it with your capital improvement plan, for the next 5-10 years. So
Yes.
I assume that exists.
I voted several places along the way, so I don't know where.
Yeah, so that's something that I haven't received, and I don't know. Okay,
We do.
does anyone else receive that? Okay.
It's in the book.
Yeah, that would be helpful, especially going forward for Board of Finance as well, but just to get a sense of the relationship of these items, because I know you were very detailed in the past about your capital plan and where things belong. Okay, so that would be helpful. And so for any of the new projects here that aren't continuations of things, so how did you determine cost? How did you come up with your estimate? Because these items look, at least the current source of funding seems to be bonding and short-term loans. So we're not doing cash for any of these. So it would be good to know how the cost was determined.
So, I'm trying to think what here is actually, the only item on here, which is phase 1, which is brand new this year, are the interior doors. And it's sort of this, I took the same approach as I did for the other things that are multiple phases for the most part. I did a baseline of what I thought the overall cost was gonna be, and then I broke it down into individual phases that I thought was a reasonable amount of money to spend, what we could afford, what I could execute, because, my shop is, I'm the only person in the shop, so I'm the engineer, I'm construction administrator, the inspector, whatnot. And then also, what can we get done in a reasonable amount of time in the schools? Because the construction window at the individual schools is typically pretty narrow. For the most part, we can only get in there during the summer. So these are multiple phase year projects where I think it's going to go out several years. I think the end cost is going to be that, and then I divide it up by the number of phases. So, and then
Yeah, just to stop you for a moment there. So for example, there was a discrepancy between the plan we got, the capital request that we got with our budget books, and then what was in this document, your Board of Education document. So is it 50,000 or 150,000 for that item, the interior door phase 1?
phase 1, the very first interior
It's the
doors.
second item on the capital request list.
Oh, let me just try the same one.
You've got it at 150, priority 6.
I have 50. 50
We have
for the
150.
interior doors. Okay.
We like that already.
Okay, yeah, I had some discrepancies both with priorities, the list that we received, independent, is a large, thank you, Kevin Gervais, for providing that in large print. So priorities, like the priorities for the doors, the HVAC, recapitalization phase 3, and that duct work, the first few things, different priorities and some different numbers. So for example, I had either 130,000 as you have written in your booklet versus 150,000 for the HVAC recapitalization. So
So the list I'm working from, which I thought is the finalized list, so I can make sure you guys.
sure, that may have been the issue.
Correct one, and I only have 10 projects on here, so I'll go through them real quickly, just
Yeah,
answer the question.
right, I think that's
So,
probably a good thing to do.
And I'm not sure if my list I'm using here was in particular order, but At the high school, A-wing windows and doors, $115,000. What we did this year was the storefront doors on the athletic wing. And we're going the opposite side of the building where it's the storefront door systems leading into the auditorium. That was $100,000, so I just escalated the cost based on what we know are the construction costs. So I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty firm with that number as an estimate. $150,000 for HVAC Phase 3 at the high school.
So 150, or is it
150.
150? So that is correct, 150,000.
That's ongoing replacement of the equipment as it's aging out. Ductwork cleaning is the next one, 130,000. We received cost estimates for the high school and the middle school ductwork 2 years ago. I reached out to the vendors to get a sense of where they thought the prices are now, and barring any significant increases in prices based on what the state of Connecticut may be mandating, those numbers for the middle school and the high school ductwork cleaning, I'm fairly confident those numbers right now as well. The interior door replacement at the high school, $50,000 for that, and a little bit of engineering and architectural, and then the first phase of that is we have a number of fire doors at the stairwells throughout the high school and the older wings that really no longer work as fire enclosures, so we'll be starting to replace those. And then as we go through its subsequent phases, because we'll take care of the most important, the fire doors first, and then we'll move to longer range plan for the high school and other interior doors. We may not do those in the future. We may just stick with the fire doors this year, next year, and be done. But that's again phase 1, and maybe phase 2. At the middle school, roof life extension phase 3, 350,000, and that's just a continuation of the work we've been doing, applying a liquid-based sealant system on the roof. And that is basically renewing the life. We get another 20-year guarantee on the roof from there, so we don't have to go through the expense of tearing it off. Again, at the middle school, this is second phase of doing the masonry repairs and sealant outside, which we did the first phase this past fall, and that's basically repairing any repointing that needs to be done with masonry, replacing mortar, and also applying a moisture-proof barrier across the masonry. Continuing in middle school, the HVAC recapitalization, that's phase 3, similar to the high school, 150 there, 150,000, and that's going to be unit 10, I believe, actually. And then the ductwork cleaning, as previously mentioned, 100.
This says one.
No, 190, sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
The line ahead, 190.
Okay, 190,000, 190,000, okay.
Correct, 190. As previously mentioned, the ductwork's never been cleaned in the middle school, so it's 20 years old, and we know it's dirty, and we expect that's going to be an indoor air quality requirement.
So for example, with that, Chris, did you speak to multiple vendors to come up with that number?
The vendors I spoke with last time were on a statewide contract.
Okay.
And so I just asked them for their updated approximate
Okay,
cost.
gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
And then the last one, as previously mentioned, that's the, and I mentioned 50K while we were talking, it's 100 here, and that number is to have the inspections and whatever is required by the state when the guidance comes out. I hope that we get the waiver for the elementary schools, and that's, if we do, I'd cut that number in half to 50.
So it would be 50,000 rather than 100,000 if you get the waiver.
That's my estimate of that right now. But again, we haven't seen all the requirements that are coming out. And then one caveat at the end of what we have seen is then make corrections. So if we have any money that remains after that and there are discrepancies that we have to meet right away, that we would take care of it. But I don't anticipate that, because one of the big concerns with the air quality regulations that are coming forth has been how much maintenance have school districts been putting into that. And we have an ongoing service contract, so you've probably seen the MCOR or NEPC trucks at our schools all the time, and that's our service vendor for our HVAC equipment. So we have new stuff at the elementary schools, and what we do have, although it's old, has been continually maintained. So, again, I think we're really in shape for what we have.
Okay. And I did try to locate your reference to the Connecticut statute there, 10-220D3. And I'm not sure that's the correct citation, doesn't matter, but if you can, so basically, are these proposed either statute or regulation, and that's what's you're really referring to? I know there are industry standards, and then we have the state's potential standards.
So the 10-220D3 was the 2006 language, I think, if I remember right. In last year's budget bill itself, a provision placed in the budget bill talks about replacing that original citation in the actual statute with new language.
Okay.
That has the requirements for the inspections by the end of the year. You stand up the indoor air quality boards and whatnot. So that was actually in the budget, tucked away in there as a separate language executed for through
So
the legislative process.
when does that become operative? When is the beginning date
The
of?
first deadline is December 31st of this year.
Okay.
Yeah, it went into effect with the July 1st budget.
Okay. Okay. Just so maybe some overall clarification. I mean, if you, when this budget proceeds to finance, some clarification on some of that would be helpful, because you can't tell that from all of this,
Okay,
just a
sure.
thought. So ductwork cleaning, I mean, in my mind, I think of it more as a maintenance project, even if it's vast, which obviously it is, because you have, probably a couple of miles of ductwork going on, versus a capital improvement project. So what's your thinking on that topic?
I agree from the standpoint of if it had been something that was done on a continuous basis, like, probably from year 5,
Okay.
2006 at the middle school, for example. If they had started doing it then and did sections at a time. Now we're in a position both at the high school, where I think the only sections I found were actually cleaned were the gym, which would probably never be maintenance. You'd have to bring somebody to get up there. But now we're in a position where they're probably going to make it a requirement to have it all done right away. Because along with the inspection requirement initially, it's 5-year re-inspection. So I think that's going to put everybody on that track to continue in maintenance. But since we haven't done it at the cost of what it would be done and the time frame that needs to be done, I think I would put it into capital in this case.
I see.
And that's why I did put it there.
And thereafter,
I
have
think
it
it
as a
becomes, like I
permanent
said,
maintenance
exactly.
account.
You budget for a certain amount each year. Because our areas we could do during the summer, but there are always those areas that probably want to be an expert in, because in the case of the gymnasium, the reason I know they've done it is they actually had to cut holes in the ductwork to work, and then they sealed it back up again. So some stuff we can get in, almost like the chimney sweeps with the vacuum on one end and the long pole, which is a lot of what they do. But other areas it's much more involved trying to get into it and whatnot.
Okay, it's an important topic. We need to have good air quality for sure in the schools, at all of them and at all levels. Okay, that's all I had for that. But we had just gotten this one sheet of paper, so putting that narrative together and and also about the state statute versus the money available from the governor, which is a different topic.
The rest of the plan that had descriptions for everything, and I'm sorry that didn't get included in there.
Thanks.
And we can make sure you get a copy of it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
I'd like to do a follow-up on that, please.
Chris, hold on.
So this is an unfunded mandate for the Connecticut statute.
As of this time, it is. That was one of the questions that was forwarded up to the new board, whether there was going to be any grants forthcoming for the initial inspections, for anything that needs to be done this year, as well as any additional grants if people find problems in their systems are reported. But right now there's no additional funding within this.
is there any ARP money left? Because air quality and that sort of thing was included? No, it's
All gone for
gone.
this year. There's 813,000 left for this year, which would be gone.
Thank you.
I have a question. Going, again, on the line item for the ductwork cleaning. It states it's a priority 9, but then in the comment, it says initial AE services and first priority fire door replacements. So, why is that under ductwork cleaning, I guess is my first question. Fire door replacement. Do we know?
Yeah, because
I think
Yeah.
the
The
chart
numbers
is
are-
wrong.
the right numbers in the wrong box.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So maybe a.
so it has nothing to do with fire door
No.
It's
replacement?
130, it says 130, it's 150,
Okay.
it's 150, it's 50, it's
All right, well, that's why I didn't understand. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Other questions for superintendent or anybody? Okay, Jeff and staff, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and present your budget today and answer questions for quite a period of time and with as much detail as you possibly could give us on short notice, so I appreciate that too. The rest of our our agenda has for continued discussion and deliberations. According to the charter and that, we're supposed to, provide comments. So if we have comments that we'd like forwarded to the Board of Finance, I'd recommend if everyone could forward them to me, say by close of business, Thursday or Friday, if that works. And then that way we can prepare them and include them, and I'll have a cover letter that will go to the Board of Finance, so they have reviewed and commented on it. Is that a problem for anybody?
And what is that time frame?
The close of business, let's make it close of business Friday, because it won't head over there till early next week anyway. So let's do close of business Friday, and then if there's any concerns too. And here again,
Did you want questions?
no, not question, just according to the charter, it says we're supposed to provide comments, so we can have comment on the budget. If we think of an area we think that can be reduced, we can comment on that. We just obviously have no ability to reduce that.
And this goes just to the Board of Finance, or does it go to the Board of Ed?
Well, it'll be a public document, so I would forward it to everywhere.
Okay.
I would make it go to the Board of Finance and Board of Ed, as well as probably, a public document.
So, so Kevin, to that end of producing for each of us to produce, our comments and recommendations, did we want to have some discussion now?
Sure, we can have some discussion right now. I have no problem with that as well. No. And here again, as I mentioned, what I take a look at, where we are, in comparison to right now. Right now, if our budget is not changed, it's a 1.6 mil increase, an increase of 7 million, well, after revenues and so forth, it turns out to be a $4,750,000, $62 increase. So that's something that I think would be very difficult, because that would, Kevin, what would that relate into someone, you're always having that ability. What? Okay, with the current mill rate, if nothing were changed, would be 1.61 mils. If someone's house is assessed at or appraised at, or their tax assessment is 250,000 roughly, or 300, what would that be in taxes?
$652.
So 1.6 or 1.1?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Bill?
For a $400,000 house, 2.38 is $9,536 a year. For 25.47, it would be $10,188. That's for a $400,000 house. The median house in East Lyme is actually $450,000. But anyway, for $400,000, it would be a $652 a year increase. But what I struggle with is why are we trying to recruit more students?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
If it cost us, if the Board of Ed budget is 66% of the budget, that means of that $9,500 that we currently pay, The Board of Ed's share of that is $6,300. If it costs $20,000 a year to educate a student, and two students, it'd be $40,000, and taxes are $6,000, then it costs $34,000 for the rest of the population to educate those two kids. It seems to me that recruiting out-of-town people, students, it doesn't seem cost-effective. I understand that our kids, we want to do the best thing for them that we can, but the more people that we bring in, it dilutes our ability to take care of the people that we have. That's what it feels like to
Well,
me.
the only way that that would be a benefit would be if you're already paying for a teacher and there are only 20 students in that class when there could be 24, then that helps to pay the cost. But that's seldom the case. which-
And that's one class, right? You're not going to have two students going through, this is 26 years, right? Two students for 13 years is 26 years. So at the end of that 26 year, at the end of the 13 years of going through, it ends up taking 83 years to pay for those 13 years.
And that's if you have a regular student that doesn't need any special services.
Yes, I'm trying not to get into the special needs students
Well-
because, I mean, there are fewer of them and it's a need that is a need. I don't understand the logic of recruiting students. I struggle with that.
I was kind of shocked when I heard that.
So the money that we spend to recruit students, I don't know what benefit. I know that it increases our property values if people are attracted to our town, but it just seems like it's a poor return on investment.
Okay.
So that's kind of off topic, but that's,
Not really.
No,
so
No, I think it's spot on.
if that's the
Yeah.
two numbers, 23.84 and 25.47, 25.45.
Wait, what was it? 20?
Oh, he
Okay.
found a,
Yes.
he found a,
Yes.
found a mistake, but it was
Okay.
in the right direction, so yeah.
So, okay. So if I use a median house of 452,000,
That one, 400 and how much, Bill?
452.
452?
This is, I did a demographic search and it came off of neighborhoodscout.com. So I'm going to ask that, you kind of take it with a grain of salt. For a $452,000 house, the delta is $728 a year.
Of course, is that what the going price for a house is in East Lyme?
The median price in East Lyme
Okay,
is
but that's
$452,000.
different from the assessed value. Your taxes are based on something different than that,
Assessed values.
which would be 70% of that, so you'd want to get 70% of that number.
Okay. Times 0.7. Oh, equals, sorry. 316, you just said that?
Sorry, what'd you say?
316. So a year, the difference is 499,
So $500, basically.
Yeah, 500.
basically.
And, there are a lot of people that's not a problem, but, we see this on a day-to-day basis with people coming in. There's more and more people coming in on payment plans for the taxes. They're very good about it. Same thing with water and sewer, reaching out for aid. So we have to not only think about the people who, an extra $400 or $500 a year may make them difficult to stay in the community as well.
That's my concern, is that the family that takes their medicine every other day because they can't afford medication every day. I mean, there's, like you said, the fuel assistant people, the people care and share. To some people, $500 a year is not much. To some people, $500 a year is significant.
Yeah.
So,
And when we look at the overall budget, I mean, the debt service, there's not much we can do there. It's 1.293897, which is a significant increase, but there's not much we can do about that. We have recognized, Kevin's done a great job of recognizing some additional revenues which have really helped get that down, but it still turns out to be, basically right now a $4.8 million increase for the Board of Ed, which is almost 5 times what our increase is. projected too, and I'm sure, ours will be adjusted as well,
Yeah,
moving forward. I mean, I'm
But
fully
that's why I
comfortable.
asked the question specifically that I did. The superintendent proposed a budget that he thought met the needs of the town. He didn't like it, it hurt, but he felt it met the need of the students. So that, to me, would be our target. I understand the Board of Ed added people back, or money back in, but I think if our superintendent feels like he can meet the needs of the students with that budget, then that's where I would want to look.
Well, it might be with that budget, but not necessarily with the proposed cuts that were made or suggested.
Yes.
Well,
Yes,
that's where the
not the
recommendation
specific
has to come in
ones.
from us, because,
Right.
and here again, Board of Finance, we don't have the ability to really change the bottom number at all if Board of Finance does, but that's all they can change is the bottom number. They can change our number and specify what. They can't do that with the Board of Ed. But here again, I think the Board of Ed will be as responsible with whatever number they finally get as well. I mean, it's difficult, as I said, because one of the things that came out in charter revision was bifurcate the budget. I think that's an awful idea because it pits the town. We're one town, we're all trying to do the same thing and move forward. And Jeff Newton had lived in Colchester, knows the horrors of going through referendum after referendum after referendum every year because they had split them out. So we don't want to see that.
On the point of bifurcation, one issue I want to just address to the board here, I will put it in my comments, and there wasn't really a need to say it at this point. It can be read in my comments, but I was really concerned that in section 6.1 of our charter, which gives us the authority to review town budget and Board of Ed budget, and then move it on to Board of Finance, where we give our comments, our recommendations on their budget, and then town departments, we make adjustments. So that's a process that in all years past has been, that I'm aware of, has been not bifurcated, since we're talking bifurcation, that we've been able to do that, have that ability to analyze both budgets at the same time and balancing, so last 2 weeks ago when we forwarded the budget to Board of Finance with our caveat about reviewing the Board of Education budget, we made decisions on the town side not seeing, in truth, all of this information, updated information. That is not optimal. And I'm very concerned about that, and it's my hope and desire that not happen again. This is the second year in a row for that, and it just doesn't make for a holistic approach to budgeting. I know during the COVID years, it was very important to see the whole picture so that we could really triage and really prioritize. So just want to make that point. It's going to be in my comments. I feel very strongly about it. There was enough on everyone's plate tonight otherwise in asking questions. I didn't want to belabor that point, but it's, the process exists for a reason. It really does. It's not just a nicety. The process shows you what you value. And what we value is the oversight of this board on financial matters before the Board of Finance sees an appropriation issue or anything else. So, that to me is fundamental, and we shouldn't run contrary to the charter. So just my piece for the night on that.
Other comments?
I agree. I have a number of relatives who are involved in political positions in other towns and a couple of other states where they do have the separated budget. And you're right, Kevin, it's an absolute nightmare. It's literally, some cases, one of the meetings had to be broken up because people were actually physically fighting. And I think we are the town of East Lyme. We're not the town of, we're not the town that works for just the Board of Ed or just for the town side of politics. We're supposed to be a community and working together to try to do the best for the community. I think one of the things that we need to consider is putting pressure on agencies outside of town, our own town, that control our finances. I mean, the other levels of government, this is inexcusable for them to be paying 6% of what they're supposed to be paying. COG, can't we begin to use power within COG and get them to put forward some measures, some countermeasures?
It is being done, and here again, I do think we'll see some relief from the state, but, my guess is we'll probably, I don't even want to guess because, then I'll definitely be wrong, but I do see some money coming back from the state because, like I said, the bill has been introduced by the Speaker of the House, which would indicate there's probably some good bipartisan support for that. So,
Well, the number of unfunded mandates are increasing, and particularly when we're dealing with issues that have federal mandates, I think we're headed for a very tough row. That we'll get ourselves in trouble if we have health issues within the schools that we knew about that were preventable, just as we've been cited for the handicap accessibility. So we just need to begin to put more pressure on outside of town agencies that are literally holding us hostage by passing requirements and then not helping us fund them.
agreed. Other comments?
If I could just add to that, what we're seeing is, we do our best with this budget, and I know the Board of Education does as well, and it just seems as we get into the detail, we begin to recognize there are things that are just out of our control. They're out of our reach, and it's very frustrating to try to control costs. And the reality is, how long can you sustain increases in mill rates year after year after year? It is not a sustainable process or reality. And part of the solution has to be a political solution, and there has to be more of a concerted effort to root out these unfunded mandates. And if the federal government is going to require something, or the state government, then they should have to pay their share. And it gets down finally to a distribution between, are you going to pay a property tax, or is it an income and sales and use tax that you're going to pay? And so is it going to be distributed on the state level or pushed down to the local municipalities? So it's a bigger problem than we can solve, but we need to try. And I think, as has been pointed out, there has to be a concerted effort legislatively up in Hartford and in Washington. That's my piece.
No one's arguing that at all. Other comments?
I guess, what Roseanne said was community, and I think that's what we're really all for. So yes, we want to support the students and the families, and we also have to support, people on fixed budgets. And I think that's really where there's, a balancing. And yes, I think that the budgets have to be decreased. I think that there's going to be some raising of some taxes, but where it is now, I think is just cost prohibitive. And I also think that there's going to have to be some money taken out of the undesignated fund balance. And I think there's going to be a whole balancing of everything, and I don't know if even at this point we have all the numbers, but, there's got to be a combination of everything. And, I don't know if when the Board of Finance, cuts the Board of Ed budget, what they're going to take it from.
Or ours for that matter as well, too. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's, but with ours, they tell us exactly what it's gonna be.
Well, actually, they've been really, even when all the three of you were on there, they pretty much always kind of left it to,
We would sometimes give a
You give
suggestion.
suggestions.
Yes.
We would say, we
Yes.
think you can cut here, here, and here, and then Mark would come back and say, I figured I'd cut over here, there, or there, somewhere else. It
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it's like this year, one of the things there's a bit of an increase for the registrar, because we know this November, there's early voting. The state is supposed to fund that, but here again,
Right.
we'll be told what we have to do, but we haven't been told how much we're getting to do that with. So, and we don't want to have to deal with that.
No, to Ann's point about community and, serving the entire community, absolutely. And I just want to say, because we're an oversight board and because Board of Finance is an oversight board, it certainly doesn't mean that we don't support good education, our school system. And, I'd just like to get that out in the open here as well, because we ask questions or we probe. That's our job to do. And we're doing it, for the public's good, and so, but certainly, and we're all aware of the downward pressures on the economy and all of the inflation that everyone is experiencing, 40-year high of inflation. These are, it's almost unparalleled times. I feel more strongly about protecting the taxpayer this year than I did during the COVID years, where we had, a better economy. And so stresses and strains might be dealt with a little better. Here, it's not just people on fixed incomes. It's your average family who is struggling, to pay the mortgage or pay the rent and send the children to school, buy clothing, put fuel in the gas tank, et cetera, and in their home tank, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not lost on me, and I don't think it's lost on any of us here, that it is a balancing act, but it's particularly difficult this year. But when you start looking at these percentages of the Board of Education budget, of the total town budget going up, if you take a little look back there, you can see that percentage going up. This is, at some point, it does become unsustainable. And at some point, hard decisions will have to be made. So we'll see what happens there. But, I don't think the percentage of 8.88 is palatable. Something more akin to what is perhaps on the town side at this point is something that should be worked towards.
And that's been my challenge, kind of along the line what you're saying and what Dan's saying, is you would think that property values would increase year over year and the mill rate would stay level, and that property growth would be what would fund, the growth in inflation and such. If you look over the last 10 years that I've been doing this budget, if you look at the proportion of the Board of Ed growth versus the town growth, they've gone from 60% to 66%. So as much as you can expect to sustain a mill growth year over year over year, you can't have this disproportionality increase year over year over year. It seems to me like there should be some reason why the town grows at a different rate than the Board of Ed. There's got to be something different. I don't know what it is. I'm not as close to it as they are. It feels like they need to apply more services year after year because there's more need. So I think that's what it is. And
Kevin, do you want to say something?
I just want to say I have calculations on the side of this work paper. The Board of Ed's 67.5% now.
Okay.
It was 66 and change last year, so it's
Yeah, 60, I got 67.44 using our numbers.
48.
From our
Because
last.
we had that little $50,000
Yes.
accounting error on my side.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with my theory right now that they're growing faster than the rest of the town, and I'm gonna try not to be an engineer for a few minutes.
Well,
And
just
just
so-
say that I think that proportionality needs to change somehow or another, because they can't be 70% and 75%. I mean,
So the
there's
increases-
84% of I believe that 14 or 16% of the population are students in the town of East Lyme, which means 84, 86% aren't. So the services have to be allocated, I think, appropriately.
Yeah, I think it's about 27% of the household, maybe a little bit more, have a student in school.
What was that number again,
20.
Kevin?
I think it's about a little over 27. I know it's right in that, somewhere 27, 29. And that's always pretty much held, I know at the highest enrollment period when I was on the Board of Ed, it was at about 29%. So, and here again, there's no question in my mind, the overwhelming majority of people in this town are committed to a strong, robust education system. And, you know, going to sporting events, going to school activities, you just see the enthusiasm with our students and our parents. So I think everyone understands there needs to be some type of a little bit of a movement in this case right here. And, you know, as I look at ours too, and I thought we did a really good job, but there's more that needs to go. And we want to maintain our educational system. I remember back in fiscal year 2003, 2004, it's my first year as Board of Ed chair, and we got cut, I think, we cut $300,000, and they cut, the Board of Finance cuts, I think, by $659,000, which this is 20 years ago. That was
That's a lot
extremely
then.
significant. And the only comment I made is we're going to provide the best education with the resources provided. We didn't lose, we still made sure that the elementary classes stayed low. We didn't eliminate any type of programs that a lot of people have participated in, but the parents came together and they looked for resources to help ease the burden. So it's a great community. I think people understand that we just can't right now pass on a budget that would be at 1.61. I'm not too concerned that would, there's no way I don't think that would pass. Because we have, you look at so many of the senior communities in town, and, they pay a lot of taxes, just like the rest of us, and, the vast majority of them are on somewhat of a restricted income.
So the only thing I was going to say too is, the town has been behind the Board of Ed. I mean, we spent, was it $45 million, somewhere in that vicinity, to, renovate the 3 elementary schools, and we're still paying for that as a town. So the town is behind the education, and that would be the whole town. And I just want to make that clear, just to everybody.
As Ann knows, certainly during the COVID stretch, the extraordinary, purchase of the various devices
Yes.
to help with remote learning. And I see Pete in the back of the room. Thanks for coming, Pete. Yeah, those are very difficult decisions, very, very expensive, for the town. So, and just, looking at this, I don't know, I feel like I need to know a little bit more, or perhaps more will come to the Board of Finance about the 8.5, individuals who benefited from, the ARPA money, and now those are continuing. So maybe more discussion can be had about that. And I know Dan mentioned it, and my own recollection was a pretty good discussion about the use of ARPA funds for things not being personnel. I think that was something that Finance made really clear, and a number of us here made clear when Ann and I served on the subcommittee for ARPA. That was very much discussed, and something we kind of avoided like the plague. We had to succumb to a couple of items like that, but so I think that's an area that could be looked at. I don't really have clarity in my head where the 8.5 folks are, if they're part of special ed now, not part of special ed, but, if not, and enrollment is staying the same, I'm told, then where are these 8.5 people needed? So that's an area that perhaps is ripe for future discussion.
Either that or changing it from, full-time to part-time to save some money somewhere. So maybe, there was a lot of people who
Good point.
stood up, but, maybe they cut it back, and then, in another year, if need be, then they could increase it.
Yes.
But,
So, no, it's not an easy task.
no, it's not.
No, and here again, too, you hate to think of the fact that you're eliminating someone's occupation.
Yes.
That's
Well, that's why I said
it's not-
part-time. That's exactly
Yeah, and it's
Right.
not
why I'm
something
saying
any of
that.
us,
No.
none of us relish that at all. You wish you could say, yep, good job, but, there's, I didn't move fast enough on trying to get the data center here, I guess, that Waterford's getting, so, actually, we have no place to put it, so, which is the main reason it's going to Waterford.
Well, I thought that the understanding was that those additional positions were gone after the COVID money.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
And I
I
thought
thought
they
so
weren't going
too.
to be placed in the operating budget, that was the whole point of the
And
ARPA
that
funds.
those individuals were
We talked
informed
about that.
that their funding was just
No.
that, temporary funding.
I think that was a
know we've done
concern.
that on
Yeah.
our side. We did
Yeah.
it for the ARP subcommittee.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Any comments, 'cause just if you can, get your comments together, and I think I get the drift of it, and I'll do a cover letter with my comments, and I'll make sure everybody sees that before we forward that off to the Board of Finance, as well as a copy to the Board of Education, to make sure they're fully informed. So,
I'm gonna have to watch the tape when it's up, because I can't remember half of what I said.
okay. Okay, seeing no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn, thank you for a very good discussion.
Yes, thank you.